Autumn, 1944. Across the shattered landscapes of the Eastern Front, the German army was fighting a war it could no longer win. Cities had been reduced to ruins, supply lines were collapsing, and millions of soldiers were being pushed backward by an enemy with overwhelming numbers. But among the chaos of retreat and desperation, something unfamiliar began appearing on the battlefield. German infantrymen were carrying a weapon that looked like no rifle before it. It was shorter than the traditional infantry rifles that had dominated battlefields for decades, yet more powerful and accurate than the submachine guns used for close combat. When Soviet troops advanced, expecting the familiar rhythm of German bolt-action rifles and machine guns, they encountered something different. A weapon capable of delivering rapid fire with the control and reach of a rifle. To many soldiers on both sides, it represented a glimpse into the future of infantry warfare. The battlefield had changed. The old assumptions about how soldiers fought were beginning to break apart. For generations, infantry combat had been built around the idea that a soldier needed a powerful rifle capable of striking targets at long distances. But modern warfare had created a different reality. Most firefights were not decided hundreds of meters away. They happened in forests, villages, trenches, and ruined streets, where speed and firepower mattered more than extreme range. The German military had discovered this problem earlier than many others, and the answer was a completely new kind of weapon. It was called the Sturmgewehr 44, the first true assault rifle to be produced and fielded on a large scale. But behind its revolutionary design was a story of desperation, political interference, engineering challenges, and a nation fighting for survival. The STG-44 was not born from confidence or victory. It was created because Germany was losing. By the time it reached the battlefield, the war had already turned against the Third Reich. Fuel shortages, collapsing industries, and advancing Allied armies meant that even the most innovative weapons could no longer change the final outcome. Yet history remembers the STG-44 for a different reason. It did not change the result of World War II. It changed the future of warfare. The question was not only how this weapon was created. The greater mystery was why it appeared so late, and why a firearm developed in the final years of a collapsing empire would influence armies around the world for decades to come. To understand the rise of the STG-44, we must first return to the battlefield conditions that made such a weapon necessary. The world of infantry combat was changing, and the old weapons were no longer enough. At the beginning of World War II, armies entered the conflict, carrying weapons shaped by the battles of an earlier generation. The standard infantry rifle remained the foundation of every military force. For decades, commanders believed that a soldier's greatest value came from the ability to engage enemies at long distances with powerful, accurate fire. Weapons like the German Karabiner 98K were built around this philosophy. They were reliable, precise, and deadly in the hands of trained soldiers. But the battlefield of the Second World War was not the battlefield these weapons had been designed for. The speed and violence of modern warfare exposed a growing problem. Armies were no longer fighting in neat lines across open fields. Combat moved through forests, cities, villages, and defensive positions, where soldiers often encountered enemies at much shorter distances. In these situations, the ability to fire quickly and maintain control under pressure became just as important as long-range accuracy. The German military began learning these lessons during the early campaigns of the war. In Poland and Western Europe, German forces achieved rapid victories through mobility, coordination, and combined arms tactics. But as the war expanded, especially against the Soviet Union, the nature of combat became far more demanding. On the Eastern Front, German infantry faced massive Soviet formations, harsh terrain, and brutal close-range engagements. Soldiers often found themselves fighting against enemies, appearing suddenly from forests, trenches, and urban ruins. The traditional infantry rifle had a major strength. It could deliver powerful, accurate shots at long range, but it also had a limitation. A soldier armed with a bolt-action rifle could only fire as quickly as he could manually operate the weapon between each shot. In fast-moving battles where seconds determined survival, this created a disadvantage. Submachine guns offered the opposite solution. Weapons such as the MP-40 provided soldiers with high rates of automatic fire and were extremely effective in close combat. They gave infantry the ability to overwhelm enemies at short distances. But they had their own weakness. Their pistol-caliber ammunition lacked the power and range needed for many battlefield situations. A submachine gun was excellent inside buildings or trenches, but less effective when enemies were encountered farther away. Between these two categories existed a dangerous gap. The rifle had power, but lacked speed. The submachine gun had speed, but lacked reach. Machine guns provided tremendous firepower, but they were heavier weapons that required ammunition, support, and positioning. They were powerful defensive tools, yet they could not replace the flexibility of every individual infantryman. German military analysts began recognizing that infantry needed something new, a weapon that combined the strengths of existing designs while reducing their weaknesses. The answer was not simply a better rifle or a more powerful submachine gun. It required a completely different approach. Military studies revealed that most infantry engagements occurred at distances where traditional rifle ammunition provided more power than necessary, while submachine gun ammunition was not powerful enough. The solution was a new type of cartridge, smaller and easier to control than a full rifle round, but more effective than pistol ammunition. This idea became known as the intermediate cartridge. It represented a new way of thinking about infantry combat. Instead of designing weapons around the longest possible engagement distance, engineers began designing for the reality soldiers actually experienced on the battlefield. The Eastern Front had forced the German military to confront this truth. Warfare was changing, and the infantry weapon of the future needed to change with it. But recognizing the problem was only the first step. The greater challenge would be convincing Germany's leadership to accept a revolutionary idea that challenged decades of military tradition. The idea behind the STG-44 did not appear overnight. It was born from a growing realization inside the German military that the weapons carried by infantry soldiers no longer matched the reality of modern warfare. By the early years of World War II, German commanders were searching for a new solution. The Army Weapons Office began studying the needs of future infantry units and recognized that soldiers required a weapon capable of delivering more firepower than a traditional rifle, while remaining lighter and more practical than a machine gun. This search led to the development of the Maschinenkarabiner, or machine carbine, concept. The goal was simple but revolutionary: create a weapon that gave individual soldiers controlled automatic fire, useful range, and better battlefield flexibility. However, turning this idea into reality was not easy. Several German arms manufacturers competed to develop a suitable design. Companies such as Walter and Hänel worked on different approaches, each attempting to solve the same problem: how to create a completely new class of infantry weapon during a war that demanded constant production of existing arms. Among the key figures involved was engineer Hugo Schmeisser, whose work at Hänel contributed significantly to the development of the weapon that would eventually become the STG-44. Over time, Schmeisser's name became closely associated with the rifle, although many simplified stories about his exact role have created misconceptions. The STG-44 was not the achievement of one person alone. It was the result of military requirements, engineering teams, industrial cooperation, and years of battlefield lessons. But the greatest obstacle was not only technical, it was political. Within Nazi Germany's leadership, new weapons often faced resistance because they challenged existing military thinking. Adolf Hitler was initially skeptical of the project. He believed resources should focus on proven weapons and larger strategic priorities rather than investing heavily in a new infantry rifle. This created a difficult situation. Military officials saw the potential of the concept, but political approval was uncertain. Despite opposition, development continued through alternative designations and limited testing. Engineers and military officers understood that the weapon addressed a real battlefield problem, and they continued refining the idea even when official support was limited. The project moved forward quietly, driven by necessity rather than confidence. As Germany's situation on the Eastern Front worsened, the need for a weapon like this became harder to ignore. Soldiers were facing enemies in conditions where traditional rifles struggled to provide enough firepower, while submachine guns lacked the necessary range. The Maschinenkarabiner concept was no longer just an experiment. It represented a possible answer to one of the biggest infantry challenges of the war. But creating an idea was only the beginning. The real challenge was transforming that idea into a reliable weapon that could survive combat, be produced in large numbers, and function under the extreme pressures of a nation fighting for survival. Turning this ambitious concept into reality would require engineering breakthroughs, industrial compromises, and decisions made under increasingly impossible wartime conditions. Creating a new weapon concept was one challenge. Turning that concept into a reliable battlefield tool was another. The early Maschinenkarabiner designs had to prove that they could survive the harsh reality of war. Engineers needed to create a weapon that was powerful enough for infantry combat, controllable during rapid fire, and simple enough to produce while Germany's industrial system was under increasing pressure. Prototype testing became the next critical stage. Soldiers who tested early versions provided valuable battlefield feedback. They showed that a weapon designed for infantry could not simply be a smaller rifle or a modified submachine gun. It needed to feel balanced, remain effective under stress, and give ordinary soldiers more confidence in fast-moving combat situations. One of the most important breakthroughs was the development of a new intermediate cartridge. Traditional rifle ammunition was powerful, but created too much recoil for effective automatic fire. Submachine gun ammunition was easier to control, but lacked the range needed for many battlefield situations. The new cartridge created a middle ground. It allowed soldiers to fire more rapidly while maintaining useful accuracies at typical combat distances. This was not just an engineering improvement. It represented a completely new philosophy of infantry warfare. However, designing the weapon was only part of the problem. Germany in the later years of World War II was struggling with severe industrial limitations. Factories were damaged by Allied bombing, raw materials were becoming harder to obtain, and skilled labor was increasingly difficult to maintain. A revolutionary weapon was useless if it could not be produced. Engineers therefore focused on simplifying manufacturing. Instead of relying entirely on traditional machining methods, the design made greater use of stamped steel components. This allowed factories to produce parts faster and with fewer resources. The goal was not perfection. The goal was creating a practical weapon that could be manufactured during a collapsing war economy. Even with these improvements, the project continued to face political challenges. Military leaders believed the weapon could transform infantry combat, but gaining approval from the highest levels of German leadership remained difficult. Adolf Hitler initially resisted the idea, partly because he believed existing weapons should remain the priority. However, battlefield realities eventually became impossible to ignore. As German forces faced increasingly powerful Soviet armies, the need for a weapon offering greater infantry firepower became more urgent. Eventually, approval was granted. the weapon received its final designation, Sturmgewehr 44, meaning assault rifle 44. The name itself was significant. It represented a new category of firearm designed around the realities of modern combat. It was not simply a rifle, and it was not a submachine gun. It was something between them, a weapon created specifically for the distances and conditions where most infantry battles were actually fought. The STG-44 was a product of necessity. It was created by engineers trying to solve a battlefield problem while working inside a nation facing defeat. Every decision reflected the pressure of war, faster production, practical performance, and maximum effectiveness with limited resources. By the time the weapon was finally ready, Germany was already fighting a desperate defensive war. But now, after years of development, the STG-44 was no longer just an idea on a blueprint. It was ready to face the ultimate test. The battlefield would decide whether this revolutionary weapon was truly the future of infantry warfare, or simply another late invention from a collapsing empire. By the time the STG-44 reached the battlefield, Germany was no longer fighting for expansion. It was fighting for survival. The Eastern Front had become a massive struggle of endurance, where German soldiers faced relentless Soviet offensives across forests, villages, and ruined cities. In these conditions, infantry units needed every possible advantage. The arrival of the STG-44 offered something they had never experienced before: a weapon that gave individual soldiers the ability to deliver powerful, controlled automatic fire without the weight and limitations of a machine gun. The first units to receive the weapon quickly discovered that it changed the way infantry could fight. Traditional tactics relied heavily on carefully aimed rifle shots, combined with supporting machine guns. But the STG-44 allowed soldiers to react faster when enemies appeared suddenly at close and medium distances. In forests and urban environments, where visibility was limited and battles developed quickly, this advantage became especially valuable. A soldier moving through a ruined village did not always have time to aim a single precise shot. Enemy positions could appear from windows, streets, or defensive positions within seconds. The STG-44 gave infantrymen a new level of flexibility. They could engage targets rapidly, suppress enemy movements, and respond to changing situations without waiting for heavier support weapons. For many German soldiers, it represented a major improvement over the weapons they had carried before. But the battlefield also revealed its limitations. The STG-44 was arriving at a time when Germany lacked the industrial strength and strategic position needed to fully exploit its potential. On the battlefield, the weapon changed small unit tactics by giving infantry groups more independent firepower. Soldiers no longer needed to rely as heavily on separate categories of weapons designed for specific ranges. The concept behind the STG-44 suggested a future where the standard infantry soldier would carry a weapon capable of handling most combat situations. But innovation alone could not overcome overwhelming disadvantages. Germany was facing superior Allied production, growing shortages, and advancing enemy forces on multiple fronts. Even a revolutionary weapon could not reverse a war that had already turned against its creators. The STG-44 became a symbol of a strange contradiction. It was one of the most advanced infantry weapons of its time, yet it appeared during one of Germany's darkest moments. It represented the future of warfare, but arrived too late to change the outcome of the conflict. The war would end before the STG-44 could reach its full potential. But the ideas behind it had already escaped the battlefield. And after 1945, those ideas would influence armies around the world and reshape the future of infantry combat. The Second World War ended in 1945, and the STG-44 disappeared from the battlefield it was created for. Germany had been defeated. Factories that produced the weapon were captured or destroyed, and the rifle itself became a symbol of a failed empire. But the story of the STG-44 did not end with Germany's surrender. The weapon had introduced an idea that was far more powerful than the rifle itself. Across the world, military engineers began studying captured examples. Allied forces examined the design, tested its performance, and analyzed the principles behind it. What they discovered was not simply a new firearm. They discovered a new vision of how infantry soldiers would fight. The STG-44 challenged a belief that had dominated military thinking for generations, that the standard infantry rifle should always prioritize maximum range and power. Instead, it showed that the ideal weapon needed to match the reality of modern combat. Most infantry battles happened at distances where soldiers needed speed, control, and enough power to defeat enemy positions effectively. This idea became the foundation of post-war assault rifle development. After the war, former Axis technology, engineering knowledge, and weapons research spread across different nations. Military designers studied German developments and began creating their own versions of the concept. The goal was no longer to copy the STG-44 exactly. The goal was to improve the idea it introduced. In the Soviet Union, designers developed new weapons that followed similar principles. The most famous example was the development of the AK-47, which combined the concept of an intermediate cartridge weapon with Soviet priorities of simplicity, reliability, and mass production. Although the AK-47 was not a direct copy of the STG-44, both weapons represented the same revolutionary shift in infantry thinking. The future soldier would no longer depend on a separate rifle and submachine gun. One weapon could perform multiple roles. Western nations also began moving toward this philosophy. Military organizations that had traditionally relied on powerful full-sized rifle cartridges started reconsidering their approach. The lessons of World War II had shown that infantry combat was changing. The assault rifle concept was becoming the new standard. This transformation was not only about weapons, it changed military doctrine. Small infantry units became more independent, with individual soldiers carrying weapons capable of producing greater firepower without relying entirely on heavier support systems. The balance between mobility and firepower had shifted. The STG-44 had demonstrated that a single soldier could carry a weapon designed for the realities of modern battlefield conditions. Over the following decades, assault rifles became the dominant infantry weapon category across much of the world. From Europe to Asia, from major armies to smaller military forces, the influence of the concept could be seen everywhere. The STG-44 itself became less important than the idea it created. Its direct service life was short, but its impact was enormous. It proved that military innovation does not always come from the weapon with the longest service history or the largest production numbers. Sometimes, a design created during desperation can introduce an idea that changes the future. The STG-44 was developed by a nation running out of time. It was built under pressure, introduced too late, and unable to prevent defeat. Yet decades after the war ended, the principles behind it remained alive in nearly every modern infantry force. The weapon had lost its war, but its design philosophy had won the future. However, even revolutionary ideas must adapt. As technology advanced and military requirements changed, new weapons would emerge to challenge the legacy of the STG-44. The STG-44 had introduced a revolutionary idea. But revolution does not always guarantee survival. When Germany surrendered in 1945, the production of the STG-44 came to an abrupt end. The factories that had built the weapon were captured, damaged, or redirected toward the needs of a new post-war world. The rifle that represented the future of infantry combat had been created by a nation that no longer existed in the same form. The political landscape after World War II changed dramatically. Germany was divided, military production was restricted, and the world entered a new era dominated by the growing tension between global powers. The focus shifted from the weapons of the previous war toward the challenges of a new military age. The STG-44 was no longer the cutting-edge solution it had once been. Other nations began developing their own assault rifles based on similar principles, but with improvements that matched modern requirements. New designs focused on easier production, better reliability, lighter construction, and greater adaptability for large-scale military use. The STG-44 had proven the concept, but later, weapons refined it. One of the reasons the STG-44 eventually disappeared from frontline service was the rapid advancement of firearm manufacturing. Post-war industries developed more efficient production methods, improved materials, and new engineering approaches. Military forces needed weapons that could be produced in massive numbers, maintained easily, and supplied across large armies. The STG-44, designed during wartime emergency conditions, wasn't built around those long-term demands. Its construction was innovative for its time, but newer designs offered practical advantages for the changing world. Despite this decline, the STG-44 did not completely vanish. Some examples continued to see limited use after the war. Certain countries and military organizations acquired remaining stocks, using them during periods of instability and regional conflicts. But these were temporary chapters. The weapon's future was no longer on the front lines of major armies. Its greatest contribution had already happened. The STG-44 had changed the way military leaders thought about infantry weapons. It had shown that the standard soldier needed a firearm designed around realistic combat conditions, rather than outdated battlefield expectations. The rifle itself became less important than the doctrine behind it. By the second half of the 20th century, assault rifles had become the standard weapon of many armies around the world. New designs replaced the STG-44, but they continued following the path it had created. This created an unusual legacy. The STG-44 was both outdated and historically important. It was no longer the best weapon available, yet it remained one of the most influential designs ever created. Its decline was not caused by failure. It was replaced because the idea it introduced had evolved. The weapon had completed its purpose by proving a new concept could work. Future engineers simply took that concept further, creating firearms better suited for modern warfare. The STG-44's time as a frontline weapon was short, but its influence lasted far longer than its service life. Even as the rifle disappeared from battlefields, the idea behind it continued shaping the weapons carried by soldiers around the world. The STG-44 was never produced in the numbers of many famous military weapons. It did not decide the outcome of a war. It did not save the nation that created it. Yet decades after its final battlefield appearance, it remains one of the most important firearms in military history. Its importance comes from what it introduced. The STG-44 is widely recognized as the first widely fielded assault rifle, a weapon category that would eventually become the standard firearm for infantry forces across much of the world. Its revolutionary achievement was not simply its design, it was the change in thinking behind it. The STG-44 showed that future infantry weapons needed to be built around the actual conditions of combat. Soldiers needed a balance of range, firepower, mobility, and control. This idea transformed military doctrine. Before the STG-44, armies often separated weapons into clear categories. Rifles were designed for distance. Submachine guns were designed for close combat. Machine guns provided heavy support. The assault rifle challenged that separation. It created a weapon that allowed individual soldiers and small units to handle a wider variety of battlefield situations. This concept influenced nearly every major military power after World War II. From Soviet designs to Western rifles developed decades later, the same principle continued to appear. A soldier needed a versatile weapon capable of adapting to changing combat environments. The STG-44 became the starting point of a new era. Today, historians, military researchers, and firearms experts continue studying the weapon because it represents a major turning point in the evolution of warfare. Museums and historical collections preserve examples of the rifle not only as a piece of military equipment, but as a symbol of technological change during one of history's most destructive conflicts. Collectors also continue to seek surviving examples, recognizing the STG-44 as a rare artifact connected to a critical moment in weapons development. However, the legacy of the STG-44 is not without debate. Questions remain about the exact contributions of different engineers, manufacturers, and military officials involved in its creation. The story of the rifle is often simplified, but its development was the result of many individuals working within a complex wartime system. Its legacy also raises a larger question about military innovation. The STG-44 was created by a regime fighting a losing war, yet the technology it introduced influenced armies around the world for generations. It demonstrates that ideas can survive beyond the circumstances that create them. The assault rifle concept became one of the defining features of modern warfare. Conflicts throughout the 20th and 21st centuries have shown how important individual infantry firepower remains on the battlefield. The STG-44 changed the relationship between the soldier and the weapon. It moved infantry combat toward a future where mobility and rapid response became just as important as traditional accuracy and range. The rifle itself eventually disappeared from active service, but the idea it created never did. The STG-44 was more than a firearm. It was a turning point that revealed how necessity, innovation, and the pressures of war could reshape military history forever. And ultimately, its story is not only about a weapon. It is about how a desperate need created an idea that changed the battlefield for generations to come. The story of the STG-44 began in a moment of crisis. It was created on battlefields where Germany was losing ground, where soldiers faced new challenges that traditional weapons could no longer solve. It was not born from victory or confidence, but from necessity. German engineers and military planners recognized that infantry combat was changing. The battles of the modern era demanded a new kind of weapon, one that combined mobility, firepower, and flexibility. The STG-44 became the answer to that challenge. But history created a strange contradiction. The weapon represented the future of warfare, yet it arrived during the final collapse of the nation that developed it. Germany possessed a revolutionary design, but it lacked the resources, time, and strategic position needed to fully benefit from it. The STG-44 could improve the abilities of individual soldiers, but it could not overcome overwhelming industrial power and the changing direction of the war. Its battlefield impact was limited. Its historical impact was not. The greatest achievement of the STG-44 was not the battles it won, but the idea it introduced. It changed the way armies viewed infantry weapons. It proved that the future soldier needed something different from the traditional rifle, a weapon designed around real combat conditions rather than old assumptions. That idea survived long after the war ended. The nations that defeated Germany would later develop their own versions of the concept. The assault rifle became one of the most important military innovations of the 20th century, shaping infantry tactics and battlefield doctrine around the world. The STG-44 itself became a reminder that innovation does not always belong to the winners of history. Sometimes, a defeated nation can create an idea that transforms the future. More than 70 years later, every modern assault rifle carries a connection to the path the STG-44 began. Its story remains a lesson about warfare, technology, and human adaptation. A weapon designed in desperation became a foundation for generations of military development. And it leaves behind one enduring question. If the STG-44 had appeared earlier, before Germany's defeat became inevitable, could it have changed the course of the Second World War? History may never provide the answer, but one fact remains clear. The STG-44 lost the war it was built for, yet it helped define the wars that followed.